It's a great field, and contrary to some opinions, I feel it takes a great deal of expertise to really be skilled at this. And I'm happy that you're here to join us for our webinar in developing ABE students' reading by applying best practices. I was also trained as a reading specialist, and this has always been my area of interest. Okay, let's think about our objectives for today, which are we hope to identify the 6 steps of direct explicit instruction and the 4 components of reading. We hope by the end of today you'll be able to describe 2 best practices that the research shows develop students' reading, to reflect on ways that ABE learners can benefit from these best instructional practices, reflect on ways that you as an ABE teacher can incorporate direct explicit instruction in the teaching of the 4 components of reading or in teaching strategies. And we want to give you the resources to locate video and print-based information for further study. Oh, right. To begin, we'd like to ask you and sort of put you in a student perspective. Can you remember a time when you were asked to do something that no one had ever shown you how to do? Think back, perhaps when you were younger, perhaps not. Maybe when you tried to cook something or do something. What was this, and how did you feel when you were asked to do something that you'd never seen done before? If we could all take a minute to respond in the chat pods, that would be great. Can you tell me if you remember what it was that you were asked to do or that you tried to do? Very good. Calculus, yeah. Very good. I can remember myself looking at a new recipe as a young cook and going, I don't even know what braising is. How do you do that? What does it look like? I think we've all had this experience of thinking we should know how to do something, but since we haven't seen it done before, we don't know really what the product might look like exactly and how we might go through the steps. So this takes us to our next little slide, which a little bit of wisdom from Zora Neale Hurston, whose quote says, "Tell me, then again show me, so I can know." This is what our students hope that we will do for them, is to give them really direct, explicit, step-by-step directions so that they will know and demonstrate the product that they should be producing. All right. This leads us to our first discussion of best practices, which is direct explicit instruction. Many of you, of course, use direct instruction, but you may not be aware of the research behind it that's going on right now, and the reasons for it. I'd like to ask right now, in a little poll, how much time in each class period you devote to direct explicit instruction. I want to just say there's no perfect answer to this question, but it's, as we do this, we want to reflect on our own practice, and if over time we change, this is a good measurement of our change. Well, it was this much now, and now it's this much. Or, and when you think of direct explicit instruction, remember it's not necessarily whole group instruction. You might be doing direct explicit instruction for small groups, leveled groups, groups that have particular needs. So if we could take a minute to just thinking about evaluating the time in each class period that's devoted to direct explicit instruction. Can everybody see the poll? Oh, very good. Very good. Ah, very good. Wow. Yes, instruction doesn't, it can take many forms, of course. But this is the first, oh, good. Okay, I see we're getting some answers in the actual poll. Can you take a minute to actually, good. More? Sometimes it can be difficult to evaluate in any given class period how much time is instruction, how much time students are working independently or in groups. Okay. Is everybody, have we finished voting? There are 5 of us. So the majority of people, can everybody see the poll? I think so. The majority of people are spending at least 25% of class time doing direct explicit instruction. Some are spending as much as 50%, and I think that's a good measure. All right, we're going to close the poll right now unless anybody has more to add. So this is reflecting on our current practice, and that's a good thing. We're going to put that away. We're going to look at the reasons for using direct explicit instruction. It's been identified by the research as a principle of effective teaching. When we use direct explicit instruction, objectives and the purpose of each lesson are clear to students. This is an important fact. We really want to explain why we're doing what we're doing, what the lesson is going to, how the lesson is going to benefit them. Each activity will then be related to broader learning goals. We're not just learning this discrete piece of information, but it is tied to what we will need to know in the future. And with direct explicit instruction, students receive a great deal of support. Instruction is scaffolded to increase student confidence and participation. All right. Now we want to look at the steps of direct explicit instruction. There are 6 steps, and I think most of you have looked at these in the pre-meeting materials. And you might have those ready to refer to. As many of us do with direct instruction, sometimes we're not aware of the discrete steps, and we do some, but perhaps not all. So it's good from time to time to review these 6 steps that the research says are the most effective ways to go about explicit instruction. The first one is the introduction and explanation of a lesson. Sometimes, I know from my own practice, I often gave this a little bit of short shrift, and there is a great benefit to writing it up on the board and taking a minute or two to talk about and explain what the purpose of this lesson is. At that time, you can activate prior knowledge for the student, remind them of what they already know, and connect it to the task that you're about to undertake. The next step is the modeling, or the I do step. In this case, the teacher explains the concept and models the task. So the teacher walks through the task, perhaps doing a think aloud. How would if you're trying to teach them how to find the topic of a paragraph, the teacher might model their thinking and lead them through it, maybe in one or two different ways, and then let them observe what the conclusion is. At this time, you shouldn't be asking students questions, just letting them observe the task and what the product should be. The next step is the guided practice, called We Do. And this is, again, a sheltered experience for students where the teacher is giving them lots of feedback. Students may be practicing the skill in small groups. It should be kind of a low-stakes experience. Students should be feeling very comfortable to try out what they're learning without feeling that they're being tested yet. Teachers should be monitoring closely, giving lots of feedback. All right, that's step 3. In step 4, our next step, is still guided practice. Teacher is still modeling, still giving practice to the students, still responding, but there is, the teacher is withdrawing a little bit. Students are working a little more independently. Maybe there's peer editing going on, but the teacher is withdrawing. Again, we're trying to make students independent learners and gradually releasing them, and that's the guided practice model. Okay, so we've got a sheltered guided practice, a more independent guided practice, and then, of course, in step 5, we release them into independent practice, which is the You Do step. At this point, students work independently to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of the concept in unfamiliar situation. So we're expecting some level of mastery here, and that they will be able to take the concept that they've learned and actually apply it. Okay. The 6th step in direct explicit instruction is continual monitoring, which goes on throughout the process. And even when you think you've gotten them to independent practice and they're off and running, you may find you still need to review, you still need to reteach, you need to give more guided practice, or they actually have mastered it, they're ready to move on, they have this solidly in place. So these are good to refer to, the 6 steps. It's easy to skip over some, it's easy to not follow it. And remember too that direct explicit instruction is not a lesson plan. You may start one day with the explanation and the modeling and do some guided practice. The next day, you may do more guided practice, more modeling, maybe a little bit of the y'all do rather than the we do. But direct explicit instruction may take place over a week or weeks or a semester. You may be holding on to teaching and reteaching the same concepts, if it's the structure of an essay, if it's finding the topic or the main idea. These things take a great deal of practice, and your direct instruction will guide the student in their practice. All right. Okay. That's if we can move on for just a moment, change the layout here. So, a question for everybody. In what ways can you imagine that ABE students might benefit from the modeling and guided practice of direct explicit instruction? We could take a minute to kind of reflect on this. And too often in ABE classes we have such a wide range of skills that students perhaps don't receive as much direct explicit instruction as might be ideal. But from a student's point of view, can you imagine, put yourself in their shoes for a moment and imagine how students would benefit from the modeling and guided practice of direct explicit instruction. Thank you, Ron. I agree. That's one of the most important things, is the big picture and why they're learning what they're learning. It increases their focus and attention. Diogenes, thank you. That's also a good example. Often we go ahead and try things, and if you have a clear model, if they have an example, thank you, Joyce, to work from, it gives them more confidence. Thank you, Emily. Absolutely. Patricia, appreciate it. Great. Thank you, Christine, and hi. Yes, learning should be a less anxious experience. Okay. Right. So that is the purpose of direct explicit instruction, to give them models, to give them confidence, to support them in their practice and mastery of any new concept or skill. All right, and we're ready to move on to our next best practice in reading instruction, which is explicit teaching to the 4 components of reading. I know some of you have likely had some experience with STAR training or evidence-based reading instruction, and in those trainings, the components of reading are emphasized, which are alphabetics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Each of these components, of course, have the goal of enhancing comprehension, which is the component that is most often taught to. However, the reading research has shown us that most ABE students also need work with alphabetics, which is work with phonics and word-attack skills when they come to an unfamiliar word. Many of them have no idea how to break it down, how to put it back together, how to recognize or pronounce unfamiliar words. This is something that you need to do assessment with to figure out which of your students really need this kind of direct instruction. Many will, some will not. But certainly an adult student is not going to acquire word attack skills without direct instruction. Vocabulary is another area where most adult basic education students need work, and we're going to talk about a model for teaching vocabulary in a few minutes. But again, direct instruction in vocabulary is also very beneficial. Fluency is an area that has often been neglected in reading and certainly in direct instruction, and there are ways to incorporate that in our practice without taking huge amounts of time. And these three components, again, we shouldn't be under the impression that they need to be taught sequentially. They all interact with each other and can be taught simultaneously, intermittently. They all feed and support each other. One little caveat about fluency is that while poor fluency will certainly hamper comprehension, students who are fluent readers, it doesn't necessarily mean that their comprehension is still good. So we want to be a little bit careful about that. All right, let's move on to the next thing. The important thing to remember is that each component of reading should be addressed using direct explicit instruction. And I wanted to give a quick model of vocabulary instruction using direct explicit instruction. This is taken from the STAR and the EBRI training. I don't know, you may remember yourself, or maybe in the past you've given students a list of vocabulary words that they'll need for an upcoming lesson, and ask them to look it up in the words up in the dictionary, which is not the current model that conforms to best practices. In the direct instruction model for vocabulary, you give the students the word and the definition they will need. Don't confuse them with 5 definitions. Give them the one good definition they'll need. Then model the use of the word in spoken and written sentences repeatedly, so they're hearing the word again and again. Then give them practice with open-ended sentences, or embed the word in questions to give practice. And this is all before you have them compose their own sentences using the word. And they can do this both in groups or independently, depending on their level. For example, I chose the word specific, which is one taken from the academic word list, and the definition I might give students would be exact, precise, or clear. If something is specific, it is exact and precise and clear. I might use the word in context. Give me specific directions so I can find your house. And you would want to use the word as often as you can in clear sentences that give them good context. You might prepare close exercises or open-ended sentences using the word. When you said, "I'll meet you later," that wasn't very specific. Embed the word in academic questions. Give specific examples to support your topic. I must say, as much as I say this, they still give me very general examples, and I keep wanting them to I keep wanting to model, and I do model, what a specific example is. And then have students compose their own sentences using the words. So this is one way to use direct explicit instruction with the vocabulary component of reading, and it is one that does enhance their acquisition of the word. With ABE students, we might expect that they need many exposures to a word before they actually hang on to it and can use it themselves. And this model gives them more exposure than many other models. All right. And we're moving on then to best practice in reading instruction, best practice number 3, which is strategy instruction. Strategy instruction, of course, is mostly related to the comprehension component of reading. And let me see, next. Yes, strategy instruction has proved by the research to be especially supportive of adult students with learning disabilities. The strategy we want to focus on today is summarizing. I participated in the Teal writing project last year and was very taken with summarizing strategies, partly because the research has shown that summarizing strategies improve both reading comprehension and writing. 2 for 1. We need to make effective and efficient use of our students' time. ABE students are often not with us for terribly long periods. And if we can give them something really solid that's going to improve 2 areas at once, we need to go for it. Summarizing strategies give practice for students finding the topic and the main idea. This, of course, improves comprehension. It also helps them when they go to write their own essays. Summarizing strategies will also give you material that can be used to demonstrate sentence combining. And if any of you have looked at the sentence combining research, this is now the model for teaching grammar, is to use students' own sentences to teach grammar. And it has been found to be a very effective method for doing that. All right. We're going to look at one particular summarizing strategy that was in the Teal research. And it appealed to me because it seemed very clear, very simple and straightforward, and it's called the WRAP strategy, which I thought also would appeal to students, and my experience with it is that it does. And WRAP stands for read, ask, and paraphrase. And within that, you need to teach students that R stands for read the passage, the paragraph or passage. Then you need to ask yourself 3 questions. First one, what is the topic? Next, what is the most important thing the passage tells me about the topic? This is the main idea. What does the author want me to know about the topic? And third, what are the important details that support the main idea? Okay, once you have answered these questions, then, this is the more difficult part, the P stands for paraphrase, or put it in your own words. And this is a difficult step, but it's one that through modeling and practice they do find they're able to do. All right, we're going to practice this one ourselves with a sample paragraph. This is something you might start with, a simple paragraph like this, and over time you would increase the amount of reading that would go into their summaries. I've worked with paragraphs and passages and short stories and whole books now, and we have worked on summarizing all of those things. But let's look at this simple paragraph, which says, the mystery of how salmon find their way back to their home river has been solved. Salmon navigate by the sun and stars when they are swimming in the ocean. However, when salmon swim near the area of the river in which they were born, they use their nose. Salmon remember the smell of the river they left as babies. All right, so we've done the first part, which is read the paragraph. The second part is the ask. The first question to ask is, what is the topic? And how do you help them find the topic? And again, you might do this as a think aloud when you were doing direct explicit instruction and modeling this. You go, well, we found the word salmon. Every sentence is about salmon. Salmon, 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 salmon. This must be about salmon. That must be the topic. All right. That's one way. What is the most common noun used in the paragraph? Sometimes they know this instinctively, but it is something to point out to them as well. Okay, once we have the topic, we ask, well, what's the main idea? What about salmon? Well, they're trying to tell us maybe how salmon find their way back to their home river. Okay, and what are the details that support that? Well, they navigate by the sun and stars, and then they remember the smell of their home river. All right, so we've found the topic, we've identified the main idea, we've got the details that support the main idea. So if you're asking them for to then paraphrase, they may come up with short sentences. Salmon find their way back to their home river. Well, and how do they use the sun and the stars to navigate in the ocean? Then they recognize their home river by its smell. So you might find they're giving you 3 sentences as they're putting this information back together. And you can then guide them into the idea that you can combine all these ideas and put them into one sentence. And this is just one example, maybe not the most perfect, but it's one example. Salmon can find their way back to the river they were born in by using the sun and stars to navigate in the ocean, but when they get near their home river, they can recognize it by its smell. So we have paraphrased and summarized in one sentence this paragraph. Okay, there is, I believe we're on to the next layout where, one second, I'd like to give you a little chance to practice the wrap strategy with this paragraph, which comes from Barbara Kingsolver's novel, The Bean Trees. It's the first paragraph. Some of you may be familiar with this book. I have used this with students, partly because it's a very visual paragraph, and I like to get students to visualize. But if we could take maybe just a few minutes to read the paragraph. I don't think I'll read this one for you, but I'll let you do it. And then in the little chat pods below, let's see if we can identify the topic of the paragraph. What is it that the author wants us to know about the topic? That's the main idea. What are the details that support the main idea? And then maybe take a stab at paraphrasing this paragraph in one sentence. This is a little bit, this is just for fun. There's no perfect way, but perhaps we could give it just a quick try, and I will be quiet now and let you read. Your turn. give it a stab out there, people. It's not, we're not, there's, and this is a practice, and we all need to practice, and this is brand new material for you. So, good, Ron. Yes, Joyce, I agree. Right, right, Joyce. Yes, those are details. Good. We're getting some good details here. Good, Emily. I like that one. I like your main idea. Yes, Patricia. Right, right. Good details, Diogenes. Good details. All right. Good. Right. Good, Christine. And very good. Diogenes, that's a nice summary. Good. I like it. Let's just take another minute more as we're coming closer to the end. So if you have anything left to say, I think you can see in this that this is not such a simple task. This is, of course, a somewhat difficult paragraph. It's certainly not one that you would just do as a beginning exercise, but this was something for teachers to do. I agree. I think you were very good at finding the topic. The topic is about putting air in a tire. The main idea is why this person is afraid. And the details, of course, are that Newt Hardbine's father got blown up and stuck on the Standard Oil sign, and he lost his hearing and was never the same afterward. And so it's dangerous to overfill the tire. And again, putting all that information in, squeezing it down, is it's a difficult but useful experience in summarizing. And once they've done this, of course, they've examined the paragraph very carefully, and they won't forget what's in it. And that's, of course, one of the benefits of summarizing as well. All right. So we've kind of, we've come to, we've walked through our third best practice, our first one being direct explicit instruction, teaching explicitly to the 4 components of reading, and using strategies. And we've had experience with one summarizing strategy called WRAP, and you'll be able to find this in the resources that we will refer you to in a bit. But you also have it in your pre-meeting materials. So I hope you'll try it out with students. When you do strategy instruction, you really want to do it over and over and over again in different with different materials, so that they really do absorb the strategy. They know it by heart. They know what questions to ask themselves. It becomes a tool that they can then take away and use in other settings. So that is the real purpose of strategy instruction. And you cannot really impart strategy instruction except through direct explicit instruction. Anyway, let's see. I think we are moving on to the next, which is okay. Now, I believe everybody is using direct explicit instruction, but can you reflect on ways in which you, as an ABE teacher, can incorporate or enhance your use of direct explicit instruction in your reading classes? Of course, direct explicit instruction applies to every content area, but it is also important. It is equally important in reading as in anything else. If we could take a minute to answer this question. Good, yes. That's a good one, Joyce. Right, Ron. Repetition in different is very important until they really have sort of absorbed this and memorized it and can use it themselves. Thanks, Christine. I've enjoyed using it too. It really is effective. Great, great. Yes, I found the DEI method of teaching vocabulary has improved my students' comprehension as well. Good, Diogenes. Good, Emily, thank you. It's a good idea. Christine, I agree. Summarizing strategies are so useful in so many different ways. And as you use them, you'll find more ways that they really are helpful in developing students' skills, both their reading and their writing. Good point, Emily. I think math problems are a very good example of how students can ask themselves questions to find, to understand them better. Gives them something concrete and that they know they have to help monitor their own comprehension. Yes, yes. Again, we want students to monitor their own comprehension, and that's what a strategy helps them do. Do they understand it? Can they figure it out? This is going to make them become more independent learners. We're giving them the tools to become more independent. All right. Thank you for those comments. I have been using the WRAP strategy this year with my classes, and again, not only does it help them really understand, it gives them the tools to, again, monitor their own comprehension, figure out that topic and main idea, and by the time they've done that, they will remember it much, much better. And it also gives you all kinds of other materials and ways to work with them. Let's move on to our last question. Whoops, last question. Here's the last question. What other questions do you still have about applying best practices in teaching? We're coming to the end of our this webinar today, but we will be having a follow-up webinar in, I believe it's May 16th. Catherine, is that right? Wednesday, May 16th at 4 p.m. I will be interviewing Guillermo Verdin, who is an ABE teacher in Los Angeles. And if you have questions that you'd like addressed, we will try very hard to answer those questions during that next webinar. So let us know what your concerns are, and we will try to address those questions in our next webinar, which will be coming up in less than a month. Carolyn, that's a good question. We will see what we can come up with. Appreciate the question. It is certainly one that I have struggled with over the years. Um, Okay. Well, let's, if you have any other questions, um, we want to begin to wrap up. Oh, good questions. Good questions. Ah, there's Catherine. Great. If you have other questions that you think of later, um, if you'll notice Catherine's email on the screen, please email your questions to her at cgreen@air.org, because we don't want to miss them. And if, things may come up in the next week or two, and we'd be happy to let you think, let you know what we think. We may not be exactly right, but we will tell you what we think. Catherine, I think we're ready to wrap this up and give you a chance to let people know about the virtual workroom and other materials that participants might need.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jennifer. So what I was going to do is actually just take a moment. Let me ask you if you're able to put either a green check mark or nothing. Put a green check mark up next to your name in the attendee list if you have already seen CalPro's virtual workroom on best practices in ABE instruction. And when I say seen, I mean actually gone inside and looked at the videos that are there, as well as the previewing and post-viewing application activities that Jennifer Block developed. So if you have visited this, please indicate with a green check mark so I get a sense of how many people know this. I see Patricia has. In a moment here, it will come up on your screen. Just 1 second, please. So this is it looks like just Patricia knows about this, or at least Patricia is able to put the green check mark up. So on CalPro's website, there's something here on the left. You'll see virtual workrooms for adult educators. There's 3 different topics. And if you scroll down to the bottom, the newest one is our focus on best practices in ABE reading instruction. And so you can, if you haven't done any of the CalPro virtual workrooms, you'd need to create an account. It might be possible to use the same account that you used to sign up for this webinar, I'm not sure. But anyway, you create an account and that will allow you to log in, and then once you're inside, I'll be able to show you just in a minute the way this works. There's a navigation menu here that's colorful, and there's another one across the top. But basically, there's a series of great videos which feature Guillermo Verdin demonstrating the steps of direct explicit instruction with his learners. And while I can't play the video in this environment for you to be able to see without kind of goofing us up with our connection speed, you would basically click the play button, and that would allow you to view each of these ones. You can see he models the intro and explanation, the I do, we do, y'all do, and so on. But there's also some great materials which Jennifer Block has created. This part I'm not sure you'll actually be seeing. Barbara, if you're able to let me know whether this is visible for people. Anyway, there's a previewing activity that helps you I was saying that in the virtual workroom there are videos as well as some Word documents which are previewing and post-viewing application activities. I realize some of you might not see that. So this part might not be that easy for me to share in this environment. But I wanted to encourage everybody to take a few minutes to log in to the virtual workroom where you can view those videos. The fellow who's demonstrating in most of the videos is Guillermo Verdin. He's the same person who's coming back to be interviewed by Jennifer on May 16th. I think you can't miss this chance to pick the brains of these two really expert ABE reading and writing instructors. So please be sure to check that out. And then the other resource I wanted to mention quickly, there are other pages within this. There's also related research. So there's many videos and many support materials and options for more in-depth study. The last point I'll make is that CalPro has an electronic community of practice. That's the sort of organization, if you will, that sponsored this webinar, and all of you are eligible to become members for free. Today's webinar will be, it's been recorded, and we will post the recording as well as any related materials in the electronic community of practice. And once you're, if you haven't joined this, you just have to click on Join This Group Now. And if you have, on the ECOP webinars page under the More tab, oh, might need me to log in again. Basically, you'll see the summary of all the related pieces for this webinar, including a follow-up discussion, which I'd like to encourage everybody to join. For this, you would we'd encourage you to actually go and try out the RAP strategy and other strategies that you heard today with your learners, and then come back and tell us what happened. What did you observe with your students? How were they successful? How did it feel to you? What more support do you need? So that's sort of the idea behind it. So on that webinar page, you'll have all the webinars past and upcoming, and this is today's with the intro reading we sent you, the evaluation for participants today, and the link to a discussion forum. So I don't want to hold us beyond time. If you need to finish up, I'd just like to thank Jennifer Block for her excellent presentation and Barbara Carruthers for her technical support. If anybody has additional questions and you'd like to ask them, please feel free to put them in the chat pod, or you could email me. So Ron, you were asking about the main CalPro website is home to the virtual workroom. And just to keep it simple, that virtual workroom also has links. They link to each other. In other words, if you get into the virtual workroom, there's an easy link to the electronic community of practice. Or if you start in the ECOP, then there are links back to the virtual workroom. So beyond the initial login, they should be able to go back and forth. So I'm happy to take any additional questions. The recording should be available as of tomorrow. It's basically as soon as I can get the link into it. So it should be available very soon, certainly by the end of this week. We won't email. I will email everybody an invitation to join the ECOP, and there will be links in that email that show you sort of where to find everything inside the ECOP that relates to today's session. I hope that's clear, Joyce. Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions for CalPro? Remember, feel free to email me either if you have questions about these resources that I shared, or if you have reading-specific questions that you'd like me to forward on to Guillermo and Jennifer for the upcoming webinar, we would be very happy to receive those. We'll have some questions. We'll gather a few from you now, but then the people who attend that webinar can on the spot ask live questions. So that's pretty much all I'd like to say. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you especially, Jennifer, and thanks, Barb. If you want to know